Hi, I'm rickdior, and we're going to do part two of my coordination sequence series. And today we're going to work on Brazilian Samba. In my book, there's many pages of these ostinatos starting on page 21. So what you're seeing are the foot ostinatos, if you turn to that page, starting with the most basic one, which most of you know, which is this. Now you could put that accent on there, mimicking the sordo note, which sounds like this. So you see that boom, 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 boom. Or you can just play it straight like this. And let the bass player play that short, long note kind of thing. All right? So what we're going to do today is go through these coordination sequences just like we did with the pop rock coordination sequence in part one. So the first one, when you look at it, is very, very simple. And that's the one you should start with. For you teachers out there, that's the one you should teach first. So all it is eighth notes on the ride cymbal, like this. Now let's talk about balance for a minute within the kit. So this type of music is top music. In other words, unlike pop and rock, where you have backbeat going and bass drum, this is top music, so the cymbal, the hi-hat, and the snare drum or the click are dominant rather than the bass drum. So you want to play your bass drum softly so you don't wipe out the bass player. So if I do a unison samba, in other words, both hands together, that would sound like this. So you heard, sometimes I'm accenting my bass drum heavier. It's kind of like bebop, you know, where you drop bombs. So you see when I mix it up, I'm playing my bass drum heavier. But mainly, it's just sort of floating quietly, creating a cushion for everything else. Like that. So you want to keep that in mind. Never play the bass drum really heavy. That's just the wrong way to play. It's the wrong feel, and it'll bog the music down and make the bass player very upset. Okay, so we're going to start out by showing you how to work on this with the rhythms. And we'll just use, once again, since you already know it from the first part of the series, we'll use page 7. And this time, instead of the first line, we'll do 2 lines, because we're going to play these a little faster. Now, when you play these slower, so in other words, if I do this, that's number 7, and that's a bossa nova. So normally, samba is written in cut time, but for today, since they match up with the rhythms on pages 7, 8, and 9, we're going to play it in 4/4. So that's how it's presented notation-wise, just so you know. So if we start the first one and we put our metronome on 110, we're not going to put it on 16ths today. We're just going to use quarter notes. A lot of times the feel of this music has kind of a lope to it. So almost a triplet feel, like. So putting it on straight 16ths, subdividing the metronome, won't always work for that kind of feel. You can do it if you want. You know, you can vary, be more elastic about it, get it straighter, almost in the pop kind of realm. And you can listen to lots of Brazilian music, and some of it is very, you know, loopy, kind of like that, where it's very triplety, and others is very, very straight. All right, and in a minute, well, after we play this for you, I'm going to talk about some of my influences as far as drummers that you should be listening to. So let's just start with number 1 on page 21, and then we're going to do the first 2 lines of page 7. So you get the idea. So instead of the bass drum playing the rhythm as we did in the first coordination sequence in that video, now the left hand is going to do it. And today we're just going to play these with the cross-drum click. When you play this cross-drum click, you want to fish around for the best sound. So depending on the stick you use and the snare drum you use, it's going to be in a different spot. But normally it's about 1/3 of the way up the stick. So you'll fish around and you'll find the most solid sound. And that's the sound I like to use. So what I'll do now is I'll play through each one of these rhythms, the 2 lines again on page 7, and then I'll play 2 bars of time with the next ostinato. So it'll progress from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right? So let's give that a shot. The quarter note equals 110. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's that exercise all the way through, which is very challenging to do that without stopping. And that's what I would recommend that you practice over time. But obviously, the first way you're going to do it is play each one separately and then play all the rhythms under it. Now let's talk about a few different ways to do this. So you can play non-cross stick, in other words, with your snare, and then you can buzz all the longer notes. It doesn't have to be exact, it could be kind of improvised. So let's give you a little sample of that. I'll just do number 4, the ride cymbal pattern, and then the left hand will play on the snare drum, and I'll buzz some notes. Same tempo. So that was the first 3 lines of that, the buzzing. Now, of course, you can do all the other rhythms in here, starting on page 8 and 9, and then in the back of the book. So if I do the same one, the same pattern with page 8, it sounds like this. So the whole goal with all of this stuff is to be able to play freely without any constraints. So a lot of drummers, they fall into patterns. So one hand does that, the other hand does this all the time. This frees you up from that. Now let's talk about some music to listen to, because this doesn't mean anything unless you're applying it. And I'll tell you 4 of my favorite Brazilian drummers, and I've gone over this before in all the Brazilian rhythms videos that I did last year. But these guys are players who really influenced me heavily in different ways. And the first one was Don Romero. This is a drummer who was active back in the 60s and 70s. Did a lot of kind of fusion stuff, heavier. And that kind of stuff really caught my ear when I was listening when I was a kid. And the next gentleman who really caught my ear was Airto, the great Brazilian drummer who played with Hermeto Pascoal and then came to the States and played with Chick Corea. His group Return to Forever. A really great example of his amazing drum set playing is on a record called Light as a Feather, and that's a Return to Forever record. That's got really great tunes on there. One of them's called You're Everything. It's got an amazing brush samba on there. A tune called Captain Marvel is a great example of a unison samba, where both his hands are playing the same thing sometimes, but improvising. And later on, drummers, American drummers like Danny Gottlieb, Paul Wertico, they adopted that kind of style with artists like Pat Metheny. So the chain kind of goes up. Those influences really last. And sometimes drummers will listen to someone modern and say, wow, that's great. I'm sure they invented that style of playing, and it's not true. A lot of this stuff goes way back. In Airto's case, it goes back 50 years. So that's a really great record to study and listen to. I used to play along with that record every day. So another guy after that I used to go see live in New York sometimes was Portinho, the great Brazilian drummer. Some good records that he's on, there's a lot of them, but there's a pianist named Manfredo Fest. He's a blind pianist, and he's got several records. In fact, on Spotify, there's a playlist that's called This is Manfredo Fest. It's a piano trio playlist. There's some other stuff too, but most all of the drummers on there are Portinho. And he's a really great, simple kind of player. Like, he didn't do anything really crazy involved, but really beautiful playing, beautiful feel, sort of free and relaxed when he plays. Really fun to watch, too, if you ever get to see him. There's some videos online on YouTube you could look at. And finally, there's a bunch of modern guys. But my favorite is a guy named, I hope I'm saying this right, Edu Ribeiro. And he's just incredible technique. There's a really good record by a pianist, Fabio Torres. I'm sure you could find that on Spotify or Apple Play. And the playing on that is just amazing, really. He's kind of a combination of Airto and Portinho, and I'm sure some other people. And a lot of jazz, you can hear a lot of modern American jazz drumming in his playing. I know that because, you know, you just hear it. Very independent, great feel, great chops, great dynamic control. And the music is extremely complicated too. So those are 4 players to listen to from, you know, kind of way back, the first kind of drum set, Brazilian fusion kind of stuff, to Airto, more of a real acoustic kind of thing with Chick Corea before he got all electric in Return to Forever. And then Portinho playing a lot of acoustic drums in, you know, really all kinds of settings. If you just search on his name online, and I'll list all this in the description here, you'll find all this. And finally, Edu Ribeiro, I know he also plays with Rosa Passos, who's a really great Brazilian singer. She's got an amazing voice, and that's very simple playing if you listen to that. So anyway, those are some people to listen to, and again, I'll list a whole bunch of others, and you'll hear this kind of independence in their playing. Now, as you progress through these exercises in this section, page 22 will have these ostinatos, and now the hi-hat is changing. So now the feet do this. So it's kind of a Bayonne rhythm with the hi-hat. And then the next page does the same thing backwards. All right, and then we get into more of a Bayonne thing on page 24, you know, where we're going with the bass drum. So these go on several pages, but the cymbal rhythms are the same, okay? So what changes are the bass drum and the hi-hat with the foot rhythms. This is going to take you, really, to be honest, several years to get through. But as you do each one, your coordination gets better, you become a much more solid player, and you also need to play along with music. That's the idea. So I named all those folks before because those are the records, if you can, you want to play along with, so you get the right feel, which is so important. So that does it for this episode of Coordination, and we'll just play a little for you, and we'll see you next time.